Behind the ancient walls of Windsor Castle, a document lay hidden in the Queen's private safe, one that would change everything the world thought they knew about the royal succession of wealth. For 70 years, Elizabeth II had carefully guarded her most precious possessions, but in her final months, she made a decision that would send shockwaves through Buckingham Palace and beyond. What started as whispered rumors among palace staff soon became the most talked-about royal revelation in decades. The Queen, known for her unwavering traditions and careful preservation of royal protocol, had done something unprecedented. She had quietly rewritten her will, transferring an extraordinary collection of priceless jewelry, worth over $110 million, to someone the world never expected. This isn't just another story about royal inheritance. This is the untold truth about a grandmother's final act of love, a future queen's unexpected windfall, and the secret that nearly tore the royal family apart. What you're about to discover will change how you see the British. The morning mist hung low over the grounds of Windsor Castle as Queen Elizabeth II made her way to her private study, a ritual she had maintained for decades. But this particular morning in early 2022 was different. At 96 years old, the Queen felt the weight of her years more heavily than ever before, and there was something important she needed to do, something that had been weighing on her mind for months. In her hands, she carried a leather-bound folder containing documents that would soon become the most controversial papers in royal history. Her trusted private secretary, Sir Edward Young, had arranged for absolute privacy that morning. No staff members were to disturb the Queen, and even her closest aides were kept at a distance. What was about to unfold would remain a closely guarded secret for months to come. The Queen settled into her favorite armchair, the same one where she had made countless important decisions throughout her remarkable reign. Spread across her mahogany desk were photographs of her family, but her eyes kept returning to one particular image. It showed Catherine, the Princess of Wales, laughing alongside her great-grandchildren during a recent family gathering at Balmoral. In that moment, something stirred deep within the Queen's heart. For weeks, the Queen had been in quiet consultation with her most trusted legal advisors. The meetings had been carefully scheduled during times when other family members were away, ensuring complete confidentiality. The topic of these discussions was extraordinary. The Queen was considering a major change to her will, specifically regarding her personal jewelry collection, a treasure trove worth more than most people could imagine. The collection in question wasn't just valuable in monetary terms. These pieces represented centuries of royal history, each one carrying stories of love, power, and tradition. There was the stunning sapphire and diamond necklace that had belonged to Princess Diana, the emerald tiara worn by generations of royal brides, and dozens of other priceless pieces that had adorned the necks, wrists, and heads of British royalty for over 200 years. What made the Queen's decision so remarkable was whom she was choosing to inherit these treasures. Traditional royal protocol would have dictated that such valuable pieces remain within the direct line of succession, likely going to her son Charles or being preserved in the royal collection. But the Queen had something entirely different in mind. Catherine had captured the Queen's heart in ways that surprised everyone, including the Queen herself. Over the years, Elizabeth had watched Catherine navigate royal life with grace, dignity, and genuine warmth. She had seen how Catherine had brought stability to William's life, how she had embraced her royal duties without losing her authentic self, and, most importantly, how she had brought joy and normalcy to the great-grandchildren who meant the world to the aging monarch. The Queen remembered the early days of Catherine's relationship with William, when palace insiders had whispered doubts about whether a commoner could truly fit into royal life. Those doubts had long since been silenced. Catherine had proven herself not just as a suitable royal, but as someone who understood the delicate balance between tradition and modernity that the monarchy needed to survive. During their private conversations, which had become more frequent in recent years, the Queen had been impressed by Catherine's thoughtful questions about royal history and her genuine interest in preserving traditions while making them relevant for future generations. Catherine never asked for special treatment or recognition, which only made the Queen appreciate her more. The decision hadn't come lightly. The Queen had spent countless hours walking through the corridors of Windsor Castle, past portraits of her ancestors, thinking about legacy and love. She understood that her choice would likely cause controversy within the family and beyond. Some would question whether it was fair to other family members, particularly Anne, her only daughter, who had served the crown faithfully for decades. But the Queen's reasoning went deeper than simple favoritism. She saw in Catherine the future of the monarchy itself. Catherine represented hope, renewal, and the possibility that the royal family could remain relevant and beloved for generations to come. The jewelry would serve not just as beautiful adornments, but as symbols of the Queen's confidence in Catherine's ability to carry the monarchy forward. The legal implications of such a decision were complex. The Queen's personal jewelry collection existed in a gray area between private property and royal heritage. While she technically owned these pieces as personal property, changing their destination required careful legal maneuvering to ensure that future generations of royals wouldn't challenge the bequest. Sir Edward Young had worked tirelessly with the Queen's legal team to ensure that every aspect of the will change was properly documented and legally binding. They had researched historical precedents, consulted with constitutional experts, and prepared for every possible challenge that might arise after the Queen's passing. As the Queen signed the amended documents that morning, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. She was confident in her decision, knowing that Catherine would treasure these pieces not just for their beauty and value, but for their historical significance. The Queen could envision Catherine wearing the sapphire necklace at state dinners, the emerald tiara at royal weddings, and passing these treasures on to her own daughter-in-law someday. The signing ceremony was witnessed by only two people, Sir Edward Young and the Queen's longtime dresser, Angela Kelly, both of whom were sworn to absolute secrecy. The new will was immediately secured in the Queen's private safe, where it would remain hidden until after her death. Word of the Queen's actions never leaked during her lifetime, despite the intense media scrutiny that followed the royal family's every move. Palace staff who might have noticed the unusual legal meetings assumed they were related to routine estate planning. Even Prince William remained unaware of his grandmother's extraordinary gift to his wife. The Queen's health began to decline more noticeably in the months following her decision. As she faced increasing mobility issues and reduced public appearances, she found comfort in knowing that she had secured Catherine's future in a meaningful way. The jewelry would provide Catherine with both financial security and symbolic authority within the royal family. During what would be their final private conversation at Balmoral in the summer of 2022, the Queen and Catherine discussed the future of the monarchy. The Queen was struck by Catherine's mature understanding of the challenges ahead and her commitment to serving the British people with dignity and grace. In that moment, the Queen felt even more certain that her secret decision had been the right one. As autumn arrived at Balmoral, the Queen's closest family members gathered around her, unaware of the bombshell that awaited them in her will. The secret she had carried for months would soon transform not just Catherine's life, but the entire dynamic of the royal family. The stage was set for a revelation that would capture the world's attention and forever change how people viewed the relationships within the House of Windsor. Monarchy forever. The grand drawing room at Windsor Castle had never felt so charged with tension and emotion. 3 weeks after Queen Elizabeth II's peaceful passing at Balmoral Castle, the royal family had gathered for the formal reading of her will. The autumn rain pelted against the ancient windows as some of Britain's most powerful and influential people took their seats around the polished oak table that had witnessed centuries of royal decision-making. King Charles III sat at the head of the table, his face bearing the weight of both grief and his new responsibilities as monarch. To his right sat Camilla, the Queen Consort, her expression respectfully somber. Princess and the Queen's only daughter had positioned herself directly across from her brother, her practical nature evident in her straightforward posture and unwavering gaze. Prince Edward and Sophie flanked the table's opposite end, while Prince Andrew sat quietly to one side, his recent years of controversy making him more subdued than usual. Catherine, the newly titled Princess of Wales, sat beside her husband William, both still processing the magnitude of their elevated roles following Charles's accession to the throne. Catherine wore a simple black dress with pearl earrings that had belonged to Diana, a touching tribute that hadn't gone unnoticed by the family. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she occasionally glanced toward the children's quarters where George, Charlotte, and Louis were being cared for during this solemn adult gathering. The Queen's longtime solicitor, Mr. James Hartwell of the prestigious firm Farrer & Co., had served the royal family for over 30 years. His silver hair and measured demeanor commanded respect as he prepared to reveal the final wishes of Britain's longest-reigning monarch. He had personally overseen the drafting of multiple versions of the Queen's Will over the decades, but he knew that this particular reading would be unlike any other in royal history. Mr. Hartwell began with the traditional formalities, the Queen's charitable bequests, which were substantial and touched every corner of the Commonwealth. She had left generous amounts to her favorite charities, her staff members who had served her faithfully, and various institutions that had been close to her heart. The family listened respectfully, knowing that these bequests reflected the Queen's lifelong commitment to service and her deep appreciation for those who had supported her reign. The distribution of royal properties proceeded as expected. Balmoral Castle, being the Queen's private property, went to Charles as the new sovereign. Sandringham Estate followed the same pattern, along with various smaller properties and investments that would help fund the new king's reign. Each announcement was met with quiet nods of understanding. These decisions surprised no one and followed long-established royal traditions. Mr. Hartwell then moved to personal effects and family heirlooms. The Queen's beloved collection of horse-related artifacts and her extensive library of equestrian books went to Princess, and a decision that brought the first genuine smile to the Princess Royal's face since the gathering had begun. Prince Edward received a collection of theatrical memorabilia that reflected his interests in the arts, while various personal mementos were distributed among grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The tension in the room began to shift as Mr. Hartwell reached what everyone assumed would be the most significant portion of the will, the Queen's legendary jewelry collection. For generations, these pieces had been the crown jewels of the royal family's private collection, distinct from the crown jewels held in trust for the nation. Worth an estimated $110 million, the collection included some of the most spectacular pieces ever owned by British royalty. As Mr. Hartwell cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses, every person in the room leaned forward slightly. The Queen's jewelry had been a subject of speculation for decades. Royal watchers and family members alike had always assumed that the most valuable pieces would either join the Crown estate or be distributed among the Queen's children according to traditional patterns of inheritance. Regarding Her late Majesty's personal jewelry collection, Mr. Hartwell began, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. Including all private pieces not held in trust for the Crown, Her Majesty has made the following bequest. He paused, seemingly aware of the historical significance of what he was about to announce. The silence in the room was deafening. Catherine found herself holding her breath, though she had no idea why. She had never expected to receive anything of particular significance from the Queen's will, apart from perhaps a small piece of sentimental value. Her relationship with the Queen had been warm and respectful, but she had always assumed that such valuable bequests would go to the Queen's children or to Princess, and who had been particularly close to her mother. The entire collection, valued at approximately £110 million, is bequeathed to Catherine, Princess of Wales, to be held as her private property with the right of disposal as she sees fit. Mr. Hartwell's words seemed to echo in the sudden stillness that followed. The reaction was immediate and varied. Catherine's face went completely pale, and she instinctively reached for William's hand. William himself looked shocked, his eyes darting between the solicitor and his father, as if seeking confirmation that he had heard correctly. King Charles's expression remained carefully controlled, though those who knew him well could see the surprise flickering in his eyes. Princess Anne's reaction was perhaps the most telling. Her face registered a moment of genuine shock before settling into what those familiar with her would recognize as her thinking expression. She had spent decades as one of the hardest-working royals, had been exceptionally close to her mother, and had always assumed that the bulk of the Queen's personal jewelry would come to her as the only daughter. Camilla placed a gentle hand on Charles's arm, while Prince Edward and Sophie exchanged meaningful glances. Prince Andrew seemed to be processing the information slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he had heard. The children's absence suddenly seemed like a blessing. This moment was too charged, too historically significant for young ears. Mr. Hartwell continued reading, explaining that the Queen had included a personal letter for Catherine that would be delivered privately after the formal proceedings. He also noted that several specific pieces had been designated with historical notes about their significance and suggestions for their future use at state occasions, demonstrating the Queen's thoughtful consideration of how these treasures should be preserved for future generations. Catherine finally found her voice, though it was barely above a whisper. I had no idea. Her Majesty never mentioned. She trailed off, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just been revealed. The woman who had entered the royal family as a commoner from Berkshire was now the owner of one of the most valuable private jewelry collections in the world. William squeezed his wife's hand reassuringly, though he was clearly as stunned as she was. "Grandmother obviously saw something special in you," he said softly, his voice filled with both pride and amazement. "She wouldn't have made this decision lightly." King Charles was the first to speak formally. His voice was measured and diplomatic, though those who knew him could detect the complex emotions beneath his words. "Mother clearly gave this considerable thought," he said, looking directly at Catherine. "She saw in you the future of our family, and this bequest reflects her confidence in your judgment and character." Princess Anne's response, when it came, surprised everyone with its graciousness. "Mama always had her reasons," she said simply. If she chose Catherine, then Catherine was the right choice. The Princess Royal's acceptance carried significant weight. Her approval would make it much easier for the rest of the family to accept this unexpected turn of events. The legal implications began to sink in as Mr. Hartwell explained the terms of the bequest. Unlike many royal inheritances that come with restrictions and protocols, the Queen had structured this gift to give Catherine complete ownership. She could wear the pieces, loan them to other family members, sell them if she chose, or pass them on to her own children. The freedom was unprecedented in modern royal history. As the will reading continued with smaller bequests and final details, the jewelry bequest continued to dominate everyone's thoughts. Catherine sat quietly, still processing the life-changing moment, while the rest of the family grappled with this dramatic shift in the royal family's wealth distribution. The Queen's decision would soon become public knowledge, and the world would be watching to see how Catherine handled this incredible inheritance. But for now, in the privacy of Windsor Castle's drawing room, the royal family was coming to terms with Elizabeth II's final surprise, a gesture of love and confidence that would reshape the future of the monarchy itself. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside the castle, something fundamental had changed. Catherine had not only inherited extraordinary wealth, but also a responsibility that would define her role in the royal family for generations to come. The Queen's secret was finally revealed, and its impact would be felt far beyond the walls of Windsor Castle. The news broke on a cold November morning, just 48 hours after the private will reading at Windsor Castle. Despite the royal family's best efforts to control the timing and manner of the announcement, word of Queen Elizabeth's extraordinary bequest to Catherine had leaked to the British press. By sunrise, Every major newspaper in the United Kingdom carried the story as their front-page headline, and within hours, the news had spread across the globe. Catherine woke at Kensington Palace to find her phone buzzing with urgent messages from palace communication staff. Outside her bedroom windows, she could see the growing crowd of photographers and journalists who had somehow learned of her overnight transformation into one of the wealthiest women in Britain. The irony wasn't lost on her. Just 24 hours earlier, she had been struggling to process the private shock of her inheritance. And now the entire world was dissecting every aspect of the Queen's decision. The initial media reaction was explosive and divided. British tabloids ran sensational headlines proclaiming Catherine as the commoner queen who struck royal gold and the People's Princess's $110 million crown. The more serious broadsheets took a different approach, analyzing the constitutional implications of such a significant private bequest and questioning whether it represented a shift in how the monarchy would handle wealth distribution in the future. International coverage was equally intense, but carried different undertones depending on the country. American media focused heavily on the fairy tale aspect of the story, drawing comparisons to Cinderella and emphasizing Catherine's rise from middle-class origins to extraordinary wealth. French publications, with their complicated relationship with British royalty, were more critical, questioning whether such vast private wealth was appropriate for public figures supported by taxpayer money. Social media exploded with opinions, memes, and heated debates. The hashtag Catherine Inherits began trending worldwide within hours of the news breaking. Supporters praised the Queen's wisdom in recognizing Catherine's grace and dedication to royal duties, while critics argued that the bequest was unfair to other family members who had served the crown longer. The conversation quickly became a lightning rod for broader discussions about wealth inequality, royal privilege, and the relevance of monarchy in the modern world. Behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace, King Charles and his communications team were working frantically to manage the crisis. The new king found himself in an impossible position. He needed to support his daughter-in-law and respect his mother's final wishes while also addressing the concerns of other family members and managing public relations. Palace insiders later revealed that Charles had been completely blindsided by his mother's decision, having assumed that such valuable assets would either come to him as the new sovereign or be distributed more traditionally among his siblings. The most challenging aspect of the situation was Princess Anne's position. As the Queen's only daughter and one of the hardest-working members of the royal family, many observers had expected her to inherit the bulk of the Queen's personal jewelry collection. Anne's initial public response was carefully diplomatic, but sources close to her revealed that she was privately struggling with feelings of hurt and confusion about her mother's choice. Catherine herself was finding it nearly impossible to process the magnitude of her new situation. The woman who had once worked as an accessories buyer for a fashion company was now the owner of jewels worn by queens and empresses throughout history. The collection included pieces that had adorned the necks of Queen Victoria, Queen Alexandra, and Queen Mary, each carrying stories of love, loss, power, and tradition spanning over 2 centuries. The private letter that the Queen had left for Catherine provided some insight into the monarch's reasoning, though its contents remained confidential. Palace sources suggested that the letter expressed the Queen's deep affection for Catherine and her confidence that the younger woman would preserve and honor the jewelry's historical significance while bringing it into a new era. The Queen reportedly praised Catherine's natural grace, her dedication to royal duties, and her ability to balance tradition with modernity. Legal experts began analyzing the unprecedented nature of the bequest. Unlike previous royal inheritances that often came with strict conditions about how items could be used or displayed, the Queen had given Catherine remarkable freedom. She could theoretically sell pieces, loan them to museums, or even give them away if she chose. This level of autonomy was virtually unheard of in royal circles, where most valuable items are held in trust for future generations. The jewelry itself became the subject of intense public fascination. Royal historians and gem experts appeared on television programs to discuss individual pieces, their provenance, and their estimated values. The sapphire and diamond necklace that had belonged to Princess Diana was valued at over $15 million alone. An emerald tiara worn by Queen Mary was estimated at $8 million, while numerous brooches, bracelets, and rings each carried values in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Public opinion polls revealed a surprisingly divided British public. Younger demographics generally supported the Queen's decision, viewing it as a modernizing gesture that rewarded merit and service rather than simply following traditional inheritance patterns. Older Britons were more skeptical, with many feeling that such valuable royal artifacts should have remained within the direct line of succession. International royal watchers drew comparisons to other European monarchies and their handling of private versus state property. Swedish and Norwegian royal families had faced similar questions about private wealth versus public patrimony, but none had seen such a dramatic redistribution of assets to a relatively new family member. Constitutional scholars debated whether the British example might influence other monarchies to reconsider their own succession and inheritance practices. The most unexpected reaction came from other members of the royal family. Prince Edward and Sophie issued a joint statement expressing their full support for Catherine and their confidence in her stewardship of the collection. Even Prince Andrew, despite his own recent troubles, publicly endorsed the Queen's decision. This united family front helped deflect some criticism and demonstrated that, whatever private feelings existed, the royals were presenting a unified public face. Catherine's first public appearance after the revelation came at a charity gala 3 days later. She wore a simple black dress with minimal jewelry, a deliberate choice that sent a clear message about her intention to handle her inheritance with dignity and restraint. Her speech that evening, though brief, addressed the situation indirectly by emphasizing her commitment to serving the British people and honoring the Queen's memory through continued dedication to royal duties. The financial implications of Catherine's inheritance began to ripple through various sectors. Insurance companies scrambled to provide coverage for the collection, while security experts advised on protecting such valuable items. Art storage facilities saw increased interest from ultra-wealthy clients wanting similar security arrangements for their own collections. Fashion and jewelry industries watched with particular interest to see how Catherine might influence trends through her choices about which pieces to wear at public events. Historical jewelry experts predicted that her selections could drive increased interest in vintage and antique pieces, potentially affecting auction prices and collector markets worldwide. Behind closed doors, Catherine was receiving advice from financial advisors, insurance specialists, and security experts about managing her new wealth. The responsibility was overwhelming. These weren't just valuable objects, but irreplaceable pieces of history that she was now tasked with preserving for future generations. The weight of that responsibility was something no amount of royal training could have prepared her for. As weeks passed, the initial media frenzy began to settle into ongoing coverage, but the impact of the Queen's decision continued to reverberate. Constitutional experts suggested that Elizabeth II's final act might represent a new model for how modern monarchies handle the transfer of wealth and responsibility between generations. Rather than simply following traditional patterns, the Queen had made a choice based on her assessment of who could best serve the monarchy's future needs. Catherine's handling of the situation in those crucial first weeks earned praise from unexpected quarters. Her decision to maintain a low profile while the family processed the change privately, followed by her dignified public appearance, demonstrated the same grace under pressure that had originally caught the Queen's attention. Royal biographers suggested that Catherine's response to the inheritance had validated the Queen's judgment about her character and suitability for the responsibility. The story of the Queen's final gift to Catherine became more than just a tale of inherited wealth. It evolved into a narrative about love, trust, and the future of an ancient institution adapting to modern times. The Queen's decision to break with tradition and reward merit over bloodline sent a powerful message about what she valued most in the people she trusted with the monarchy's legacy. As Catherine settled into her new reality as one of the world's wealthiest women, she carried with her not just the financial value of the inheritance, but the weight of the Queen's final expression of confidence in her ability to serve the crown with distinction. The jewelry would sparkle at state occasions for decades to come, but its true value lay in what it represented: a grandmother's love, a sovereign's wisdom, and a bridge between the monarchy's storied past and its hopeful future.